Hey there, everybody. Bob Betty Bar here, and welcome to episode 12 of the My Friends Are Amazing podcast. This episode is actually a celebration episode. We hit 1,000 listens last week, and I just want to celebrate a little bit. Didn't have a guest scheduled for this week, and sorry I did miss last week as well. Holidays kind of set me back on scheduling and didn't want to try to throw together a show with a guest that wasn't prepped. So, this is a result of being super lazy and failing to book. So it happens. Let me give you an idea of how this episode is going to go. I'm going to still do my sponsor reads. After all, they are sponsors of the show. And then next, I'm going to share highlights of the early stages of this little hobby project. Thought I might go through the episodes and just kind of give you an idea of what my favorite pieces were. Probably gonna wander with my thoughts and be all over the place, and I think maybe I'll talk about future guests, maybe not, but where the project is going and some other random stuff. Who knows? We'll just see where it goes. I hit record and I've got an open mic here and a list of talking points. Finally, I think I'm going to take a few minutes to talk about another project that I'm super excited about and some of the pitfalls and positives of that new experience. And maybe as a bonus, I'll rant about Bitcoin. I don't really have that on my notes, but maybe I will because it's been a crazy couple days and a week of Bitcoin. The biggest bonus is since I don't have a guest, this is probably not going to be as long as other episodes. Obviously, just one person talking, and I don't have a list of questions, so we'll see how long this takes. But I hope you hang with me and hear the review of my episodes, and maybe that will inspire you to go back and either listen to or re-listen to some of the great ones. Like I said, 11 episodes in. This is episode 12, and there's some really good stuff in there. So anyway, let's get on with the sponsor reads. Today, just like every other day, the podcast is brought to you by Social Imposter, reputation management for social networking profiles. Social Imposter is a customized service utilizing proprietary technology that finds and mitigates the removal of fake social network pages on behalf of high-profile brands, actors, athletes, models, musicians, politicians, military officers, business people, members of the clergy, and their management teams. So basically, if you have a social media presence and you are concerned that the viewers of your page might be taken advantage of, or your brand might be damaged by people out there impersonating you, and trust me, most of those high-profile pages do have impersonators, you're going to want to reach out to my friend Kevin Long at socialimposter.com to help him or have him help you get rid of those imposter pages. They've got a really great system in place, and he's really brought that software along. And we'll talk about Kevin a little bit later in this episode because he was actually one of my guests. The podcast is also brought to you by The Bob and Kevin Show. Different Kevin, Kevin G. The Bob and Kevin Show streams live on YouTube every Monday morning at 8 a.m. Eastern Time. And this week is episode number 8. So that's all I'm going to say about the Bob and Kevin Show for right now because it will come up later in this episode. So let's just go ahead and get things started. So it dawned on me when I started to come up with an idea for this episode that some of you might be hearing this for the very first time. So I should probably tell you a little bit about why I'm doing this show. So the name of the podcast is My Friends Are Amazing, and I had a list of, people that I wanted to have conversations with, but it didn't start out as that. I was looking for a hobby, and I really didn't know what I wanted to do. My background, I have a degree in journalism, so I've always had an affinity toward writing, and I really love taking meetings in my professional life just because I like to meet people, see how they do things. I've been reading some things about, one of the quotes is that, you are the sum of the 5 people that you hang out with on the most regular basis. I'm paraphrasing, probably butchered it, but basically, you're the sum of who you hang out with. And I started to think about the people that I've met and the people that I've known for most of my life. Some of them, brand new friends, but a lot of them, people that I've known for a really long time, and kind of just retraced who those people were when I met them and who they are today. And, I have like some really amazing friends. So, from that statement, me saying, "Oh my gosh, I have some really amazing friends," I came up with the name of the show. My Friends Are Amazing. So then I started to jot down a list of people that I wanted to talk to. And once I came up with that list, I started inviting people. And without fail, I would ask somebody to be a guest on the podcast, and they'd be like, "Oh, I don't have anything that's amazing in my life." And I'm like, "No, actually, you do." And I would start to list out the things that they had done that were just pretty awesome. And, after a couple of minutes of having that conversation, my friends were like, "Huh, well, I guess I would like to be part of this." So I've really had nobody say no permanently, but definitely the first reaction is, I don't think I'm going to be good for the show. But, so far, 11 times out of 11, I'm batting 1,000. My friends are definitely still amazing. So just a little glimpse of how I put together the show. I use a piece of online software called Microsoft OneNote. And I use that because I can see the notes on my phone, my iPad, my laptop, you name it. So once I've determined who's going to be the guest on the show, I start to jot down the show outline. And the show outline is really just like anecdotal notes of what I know about the person. And without fail, those little notes kind of, when I write them down, they cascade one point from the next. But there's all kinds of things that come up in the conversation where, it will just meander. We'll be on one topic and something will come up and I will, take note of that mentally or actually physically write it down or jot it down in OneNote and try to bring that back up in the episode. And it's planned yet organic all at the same time. I do try to check all the items off my list by the time that the interview's done, but sometimes they don't get checked off because the topics just get so deep and robust. I try to keep it around an hour for the format. So I always say that I'm reserving the right to recall the witness or my guest in this instance, because there's just so much to talk about with all these people that have been such a big part of my life and really have helped shape me into the person that I've been or I am right now. So I do hand write out by typing it into OneNote, the intro and the sponsor reads for each episode. So one of my other goals with the podcast is to have minimal editing. I just don't want to get bogged down in the production and the post-production. I figure if I have a good setup and I can, read the intros half decently, I'm not going to edit those out. Something I talk about with my sponsors ahead of time too, that the sponsor reads are live and there's just not a whole lot of polish and editing that goes into each episode. So, I keep the outline and just try to make sure that I cover a bunch of the topics that I can. And once it kind of gets close to that hour, I do keep an eye on the recording time. I will, kind of cut it off. And one of the things that I like about the show, because it is about, my friends being amazing, is one of the last questions that I ask each person when I interview them is I ask them if they know someone that we both know that they think will be great for the show. And the reason why I ask that question is twofold. The first reason why I ask it is because, it kind of guarantees I have a guest list. Duh. So I'm always building that guest list looking into the future. The second reason why I ask it is kind of a pay it forward kind of mentality. And it's very intentional. I'm not going to lie. When I discovered that I do have this amazing list of friends that have done really great things that cover such a broad spectrum, I just want people that I have this conversation with to think about that as well. So, I asked them at the end of the conversation, do they know someone that would be great for this podcast? And I really feel like it gets their wheels turning and they're thinking about how amazing their friends are. Obviously there's some crossover from each person that I interview. We have friends in common, but they have a whole nother life outside of the friend circle that we're involved with together. And so I'm sure that they have, just another subset or another circle of amazing friends as well. So yeah, it's definitely intentional that I asked that question. So that gives you a little bit of an idea about what the concept for the show was and kind of what my direction is week to week in having these conversations. There's part of me that does it for the same reason that I do social media. It's not that I'm obsessed with social media. I like the I like the breadcrumb kind of aspect of it. You upload a memory, you talk about a memory. I don't do, yes, I do shoot pictures of my food and, things like that. But sometimes those are actually memories as well that I want to hold on to, because when I take a picture of my food, it's usually not food I order at a restaurant. It's food that I've, either prepared by myself or cooked with, Caroline, my wife, or members of the family. And it's just kind of like, it's a mile marker for, this part of my life. And this podcast is a lot of the same in that regard. These interviews are something that I'm going to hold on to because these people are near and dear to me. And it's great to go back. I actually listened to them a little bit today, each one of them, to inspire me to write the review notes or the look back notes that I'm going to share in the next segment here. But it really is. There's definitely a selfish aspect to this. I'm not in it to monetize this podcast. There is an experimental part of it about building audiences, and I'll touch upon that a little later. But that is probably a really good segue into starting to just kind of give you a quick glance back at the 11 episodes that I've done so far. So really, for 11 episodes, if you're looking at an hour-ish each episode, we'll say flat hour. So that's 11 hours of recording just in and of itself. And then there's probably an hour to an hour and a half, even with my minimal editing in the post-production for each one of those episodes. Edit the photo for the episode, put it up on the website, do the final editing, all that blah, blah, blah. There's a checklist of stuff that goes into it. So I've got the 11 hours recording. We'll do another 11 hours for post. So that's 22 hours. And then there's probably a good hour in prep. So, over the course of the last, 15 weeks, it's been about a 40-hour total adventure, and I'm loving every minute of it. Wouldn't trade it. I can't wait to do more of these, but, that gives you a little background into, what it's all about. So let's just start with the review of the episodes. So my first episode, Andrew Barta. I met him a few years back through Umbraco. You can find out all the background on how Andrew and I know each other by going back and listening to the episode. But it's funny how in that first episode, Andrew started talking about audience building. Like that's something that he's doing in this phase of his life. And it's funny, I had him on the podcast. I really had no idea that I was embarking down a very similar path. But with a podcast, that's really what you're doing. I upload an episode and I want people to hear it, not because I want the personal accolades, but I'm proud of the work. And I'm also excited for, everyone who listens to these episodes to get a glimpse into the personalities of the people that I'm interviewing. So it was very, very cool that my first guest was talking about, this audience building thing. Beyond that, Andrew and I had awesome discussions about him traveling the U.S. as a digital nomad. So basically he was going from place to place. I don't want to give it, so you got to listen to the episode, but there's some awesome pro tips in there about his gym membership / shower facilities and camping on BLM land. So that's definitely worth a listen. Some of the funny things, because, this is episode 1 and early into the technology of how I was doing things, and the audio gets a little out of sync and there's dogs barking in the background, and he was in his office, but his office is a big open loft and you could hear his roommates / workmates talking in the background, and somebody was opening a trash bag, that waving plastic sound. So all definitely priceless, and hopefully if you go back and listen to that episode versus say episode 11, you'll see the difference in the audio quality, and I'll touch on how that all came around as well. And it's some of it's technology and some of it is proximity. So I definitely want to hang on to episode 1, but I cringe a little bit when I listen back to it. So episode 2 had my great lifetime friend Kevin Long on the show, and Kevin's probably going to be, I would guess, at least once a quarter. We have so many hours that we could talk about things, and we basically grew up together, and his first time on the show, we didn't really even cover any of our growing up together. We mostly covered his professional life, and Kevin's got a very interesting professional life / career path. Don't want to give too much of it away, but he runs some tech companies and basically doesn't know a thing about tech. Well, he's learning. I mean, they say you can't teach an old dog new tricks, but Kevin's been learning new tricks most of his days. So definitely give that episode 2, a listen with Kevin Long. He's going to be on the show a lot. So the next episode 3 with Sunday Coulter, so I'm 3 episodes in and I have my first controversy. Sunday and I, our first time around, apparently talked a little bit too much about work. So I do have listeners that are, current friends from back when I was a kid, people I don't know, people I've met through different adventures, and some of my listeners come from where I'm employed. And one of the people at the office heard the episode and thought it was a good idea that we might want to re-record because we talked a little too much shop and a little bit too much about how the sausage is made at my place of employment. So we actually pulled the episode down. I had to throw up a sorry for that. We'll re-record in a few days. And Sunday was gracious enough to actually be back on. And the funny thing is the second episode, we shied away from the work conversation. And I believe that the second recording was far superior than the first as far as content goes. I mean, the work stuff it's got value. Don't get me wrong. And I do still have a copy of the recording, and maybe, years from now I can release that in, because there's some valuable stuff in there about brand management and the way it happens in small companies versus large companies. So there's some good stuff in there. We did actually touch upon it a tiny bit, I believe, in the second recording, but the biggest thing we focused on was Sunday's art. So she was my first guest that talked about her, I don't know, it's not commercial art. She's not selling it, but she just does so many different artistic things. And we also talked about her commitment to physical fitness and, how that works for those of us that are in a little bit of an aging set. We are not 20-year-old kids anymore, even though some of the people I've had on the show are much younger. Sunday and I definitely don't fall into that set. So we talked about some of our challenges with staying physically and mentally fit as we age. And, since a lot of the people that I know are in technology for their day gigs, that lifestyle with sitting at the desk and stuff just gets a little rough on the body. So we got to keep the mind and the body limber and well exercised. So we did talk about some of that. So definitely check that one out. And, if we get enough pressure, maybe we re-release the first recording on that, because there are some great nuggets in there, like I said. So in episode 4, my friend Kevin Grzewski, it's a hard G, I believe. I've been pronouncing it wrong for many of the years that I've known him, and it's something that he and I are working on together. He's teaching and I'm trying to learn. But Kevin and I talked about we talked about audience building. It did come up again because Kevin has 2 YouTube channels. One is a partnership that we'll talk about in a little bit, but his primary channel, or his first channel, Kevin Kevin still is. He does a YouTube channel and features his adventures in coding. Kevin is an amazing developer, and he shares some of his insights and tips and tutorials on his YouTube channel. Funny thing is it turns out he also has a passion for journalistic stuff as well, and not just journalistic. He's got a comic stint to him too. So he and I have been involved in some pretty fun and creative videos, but he definitely has a large following with his technology tutorials and his just general approach to technology. He's a brilliant mind, and that definitely comes through in the podcast. The other project that he just started, he and I started, we're about 8 episodes in. 8 episodes, so that's 1 a week, is the Bob and Kevin Show. But I'll expand upon that a little bit later in the show. There's so much that I wanted to get Kevin to talk about in addition to his audience building and his technology stuff, but he told me that all that other stuff was off the table. So maybe if I get him on the show again, because I know I will, because I asked him to be on the show tonight. He's actually the first guest that told me a soft no and held to it. Wanted to have him on to talk about our new show and the audience building aspect of it. But maybe if I get him on the show again, I can get him to share more about his crazy, amazing past. He's done a lot, and some of it he's just not ready to talk about. If he's listening, maybe you could hit him up on the Twitter, or maybe this will twist his arm enough that he will come on the show again and talk about some of the stuff that is not top secret, but just not something he talks about on a regular basis, but is totally amazing. And I think everyone listening would get a ton out of that. So maybe we browbeat Kevin, or maybe he's going to get really mad at me for saying this. So we'll see how it goes. My next episode 5, was with my friend Erica Quessenberry. Erica is out in Bellingham, Washington, and Erica and I have been to a lot of the same Umbraco-based conferences. That's how we know each other throughout various places on the planet. She's a great person, and she is a small business owner / solopreneur as a UX UI expert. On the episode, we had great conversations about diversity in the workplace and her experiences as a UX UI professional. We also discussed her extensive travel adventures. She has been pretty much everywhere. I don't know if she's got a planned trip coming up to Australia for a conference. I wish I was going to that one, but I got told no. So she's got maybe more travels coming up on the horizon soon. But we talked about her adventures and how she works those into her long-term personal and professional objectives. Erica doesn't really work while she travels, so she works in furious spurts so she can travel and just be free. So we cover a lot of that in the episode as well. So I don't know about you, but at this point I'm seeing definite patterns within my friend group related to their independence, their overall success in their careers, being experts in their field. Definitely, even 5 episodes in was getting huge validation of my initial premise that my friends truly are amazing. You can go back and listen to these episodes and find out for yourself. But trust me, I have some really great friends. So it continues to go on from there. Episode 6, this was actually... The episode 6 was with Chris Lowe. Chris was my first podcast where I was actually in the same room with my guest. So up until now, episodes 1 through 5, my guest was someplace else in the country, sitting in front of their computer with a microphone, and we would both basically have the same web page up that would do 2 remote recordings. It wouldn't record over the internet, but it would record through the internet to the local storage. This gets a little nerdy, but at the end of the recording, both of us would have to wait for the episodes to download, the individual recordings to download. I would get both copies. The guest would just get their copy. So with Chris was the first one where we were actually in the same room. Now, we weren't in my studio here at home. We were both on a school board retreat or conference, I guess. Conference is probably the best word. We are at a conference, and we were in my hotel room, and I had a Zoom H2N recorder that I purchased specifically to do recordings in the same room. So it was the first time I got to use that little toy, and it was great. The biggest thing that was great is it's so much easier to have conversational continuity and flow with that person in the room with you. Eye contact is huge. So this has definitely given me inspiration on how to do the podcast differently in the future. I might record locally using like a Zoom video video conference or a Google Hangout. I haven't decided technically how I'm going to do it. I may just have the video feed up to have that eye face-to-face contact and still record the same way that I have been, but I might have to do some testing. But so this episode was also amazing because this was the first episode where yes, of course, Erica and I talked about diversity in the workplace, but we didn't really spend a lot of time about this. This episode was interesting because the bulk of the episode was about some social topics. So Chris and I spoke about him growing up in a biracial home in the 70s and 80s. And so that's kind of the background, the backbone of the conversation. And so I'm kind of glad that we did that one face to face, because it was very easy to follow the flow of the conversation and see where on his face where there was room to ask more questions, if that makes any sense. So I'm learning a lot about how to, I don't know, maybe have better conversations, maybe to be a better listener, because I have to listen really intently when I'm having these conversations for the podcast, because that's where the next question comes from, is from what the person I'm speaking to is talking about. So maybe that is a byproduct of this, that I guess I've considered it a little bit, but saying it out loud on a recording here, I guess I'm realizing that that is definitely another bonus of doing this. So yeah, definitely check that one out, because I think you'll get a lot out of it from the conversation, but maybe you can give me some feedback on, am I getting better as an interviewer? Am I getting better at listening, really, is what it boils down to. So yeah, and I had a blast with the H2N. In fact, I took that to London and did some recording with friends there too. Always was in pubs, so it was a little loud. So none of those recordings actually have made it into the wild, because they're just not very good quality. But the recorder itself is excellent for group conversations or one-on-ones. So yeah, if you're looking for a piece of remote recording equipment, Zoom H2N for sure. So moving on to episode 7. So this is where I took a leap here. Episode 7 was with Lillian Beattybar. And hopefully the name sounds familiar, because it's the same last name as mine. And she's my daughter. So I actually expanded the scope of the podcast to include family members. And it's because, my family is amazing too. And I actually feel like I have great relationships with everyone in my family. So yeah, they're definitely friends. So Lillian is my youngest child. And this was amazing on a bunch of different levels. The first level was that speaking to my 16-year-old daughter as someone I'm interviewing on the podcast. Once again, back to the listening. I had my outline of things that I wanted to cover, but I really enjoyed just listening to her responses and riffing off those responses and kind of moving through the topics that we moved through. She's been a gymnast most of her life, and so that was a big focus of the conversation, of like what that has meant to her and how that's impacted her growing up and maturing, and what kind of, ethical stuff she's taken with her from that experience. But, once again, don't want to give it all away. So definitely check out the episode. It was also cool because it's the first time I've had a face-to-face interview in this office, my home studio. We didn't have any special mics or anything like that, other than the Blue Yeti that I use on a regular basis. And we shared that. And I think it worked out pretty well. Getting the right distance and things like that. But definitely check that one out. We cover a lot of stuff that I consider not your typical 16-year-old kid stuff. So after that episode went really well, I decided that I had to open it up and interview my other two children, Joshua and Owen. So they come a little bit later in the process. But before we get to Joshua and Owen, got to talk about episode 8 with Big John Coulter. Yes, John Coulter is Sunday's husband from episode number 3, but John is definitely my most rock star interview so far. This went back to a remote. He was at his house in Pennsylvania, and I was at my house in Illinois, and we did it over the internet. But still, John and I have great rapport, and the dude is just funny as hell. So, the big highlight from this episode is, the dude has punched Russell Crowe in the face at a bar. that's really all I have to set up for this episode. There's, how much more rock star can you get? We covered so much stuff. John has done amazing things in his life, and he's going to continue to do amazing things. OTR driver, stand-up comic. The dude is done. Seriously, you have to listen to this episode. It's an hour that I will just look back on for a really long time because it was so much fun, and I actually cannot wait to have him on the show again. Once again, an episode where we just barely scratched the surface. I think next time we have him on, definitely going to focus more on the writing and the stand-up and all that good stuff. So, moving right along to episodes 9 and 10. This is Joshua and Owen Beatty Bar, 2 separate episodes. Just want to say that my kids as a whole, the 3 of them, they just couldn't be more different. And they're all amazing in their own special ways. I had a blast interviewing each and every one of them. So over the Christmas holidays, I knew it was going to be tough to book guests. So I decided to loop in Josh and Owen back-to-back weeks. And it was a really good decision. Also, with Josh being home, he's going to be a sound engineer when he graduates from college. He just loves everything audio. He's a great musician. He's got perfect pitch, all that good stuff, stuff that makes you sick. But he's just a very smart, creative young man. And he helped me trick out the studio. So he works for a recording studio here in town. And so we had access to a bunch of different mics to demo and some other recording hardware. So he hooked me up with an audio box, USB in. It's got inputs for a couple XLR mics, and we tested out a bunch of different mics, and we actually found out that my voice and my voice most particular works with a Shure SM58. So picked up one of those after that little test, and we actually did the podcast together in the office with 2 separate mics for the first time with me and Josh. So he also helped me tons with post-production, and we didn't really talk. I mean, we talked about his career or his future career as an audio engineer, and talked about some hardware and software stuff, but we really talked about just a really wide variety of things, and that was another great episode. He definitely spoiled me when he was home because I had a built-in post-production engineer, but we set up some presets, so I think I'm all good to at least get my voice, and he showed me some tips and tricks how to sweeten up remote audio as well. So he spoiled me, and I'm honestly a little bit afraid for remote episodes. But like I said, he gave me some tools, to be prepared to do these remote ones. So maybe I'm excited for the next remote one to see if I can make it sound like it's not remote. We'll see. So after Joshua's episode, I had Owen on, and Owen is another episode that had to be recorded twice. Not so much for controversy. We had some technical difficulties that just stopped recording about 20 minutes in for some reason. And then also, Owen and I weren't on the top of our game, neither one of us. It was the holidays, and too much food, maybe too much drink and other things. And we decided to record a podcast episode. And after the technical difficulty, I listened to it back, and I was just like, oh, this is really bad. I said, let's try to do this again tomorrow when we're both a little bit better prepared. And so we came back and recorded it again, and it went great. And we also had the great dual mic setup that Josh had put in place for us here in the studio. And Owen and I talked a lot about his eventful life around martial arts and color guard experiences in his traveling. He's done quite a little bit of traveling for an 18-year-old kid. So definitely check that one out. And I think you'll like it. I definitely did. And I want to share that with everyone too. So now we've reached episode 11 with Bran Kroc. Actually, that's the most current episode, and that episode is performing quite well. A lot of that's due to the support from Bran and her family, sharing it pretty wide on their social medias. But I think it's because it's just from an interview and journalistic and topic standpoint, definitely one of the most meaty episodes. I had actually planned to do this recap episode after episode 10, but it turned out a good friend and someone I've known for their entire life was back from college. That was Bran. And I had to get them on the podcast for sure, because Bran just has a really unique story, and Bran is a wonderful person, and it was very easy to talk to them about these challenging topics. Another face-to-face interview with great technology, so that's it sounded great. I was super happy with that. We had the headsets going and we could both hear, and we were both very happy with the sound. But we also covered a lot of interesting and challenging topics. Bran is a transgender, non-binary person, and we discussed some of the topics related to establishing a new identity as a young high schooler or an early college-age student. Talked about how gender studies as a topic at a university level, how that factors into the learning process and just the university experience. Don't want to give a lot away, but learned a ton. And from the response from the episode, a lot of the people who have tuned in have really enjoyed it too. So if you haven't checked out episode 11 yet, I definitely encourage you to maybe, don't start there. Start at 1, go all the way through, see the evolution of the way things have grown with the podcast. So that basically catches you up to date with the podcast episodes. Like I said, give them a listen, because I just really scratched the surface. Each one of them is at least an hour long, and I've only been speaking for about 30 minutes on them. So I've really given you the condensed version. The big takeaways is that I really wish I could get to the point where I could have all my guests in studio. Just the recording quality, the quality of conversation, and the editing experience is just so much better. Maybe when some of my other things take hold and start to bring in cash, maybe I can build a nice studio in a centralized location and just bring the guests in. That would be great. So that is like a long-term dream goal. The regular recording the episodes with audio stretching, I've talked about that. Hopefully maybe bring video into the process just for that eye-to-eye, face-to-face thing, and it will actually increase the quality, the conversation quality of some of those remote episodes. Anyway, if you're wondering, if you stumbled upon this episode, there's tons of different ways that you can listen to the podcast. I'm on iTunes, Stitcher, TuneIn Radio, Google Play, I think FM. There's a bunch of different podcast networks that have picked up the feed, but probably the one I'm most excited about, I am a huge fan. 2017 and 2018 are going to be the years of the voice assistant for me. And I have the Amazon voice assistant. Not going to say her name because she will chime in on the podcast. She's been on several of them already. But there's a great skill for the Amazon voice assistant called AnyPod. And I'm not sure if it's on Google or not. I should check that out and spread that along. But AnyPod, great skill to add to your Amazon voice assistant. So basically you can say, hey, Amazon voice assistant, ask AnyPod to play My Friends Are Amazing. And they will just go out and grab the latest episode and start playing it. So it's super fun. Same thing works with TuneIn Radio. You can do that as well. All right. So the thing that I want to close this episode out with is talking about one of my new ventures. It's another audience building thing. It's not really a podcast. It's more of like a YouTube show. It's a technology show. It's called The Bob and Kevin Show. So Kevin Gieseski and I are doing this Monday mornings at 8 a.m. Eastern, and we are doing an actual live technology news show. So we typically cover 3 of the technology news headlines from the week prior, or a couple headlines and then something that's near and dear to us. Like maybe we got a new piece of technology as a toy, or there's a topic we've always wanted to discuss. But typically it's about 3 major topics, and then we do this fun thing where we take turns doing a 3-question quiz. Do you see a theme here with 3s? But we do a quiz, and so this week it's my week to choose. But basically we choose a topic, and then we get to ask any 3 questions. And so basically it's just a knowledge share and a knowledge check. I don't think anybody's been 3 for 3 yet, and we're heading into episode 8 this week. So it's fun. The crazy thing is that we didn't really get in it to monetize it. But of course, as soon as we start ramping up and getting up to speed, YouTube comes out with a new monetization rule scheme. And basically what they're saying now is you have to have 4,000 hours of watched video time in the previous 12 months and at least 1,000 subscribers. So since we are just into week 8 or episode 8 of this venture, let's just say we are a little shy of those marks right now. So if you're looking for something new to check out, definitely do a search for the Bob and Kevin Show on YouTube, and we'll come right up and watch some of the episodes. It's also really funny to watch the evolution from episode 1 to episode 8, which is coming out this week, because we've really grown into our own personalities in this short 8 weeks, but also we've grown into the technology that we're using as well. We are using OBS Studio, and it's open source, which is awesome. So the relative amount of investment for the show has been really low. The biggest investment has been the time and the energy to learn about the software, which is awesome because we've learned to just basically hack the hell out of it. We make it do stuff that most people that are using it are not doing. So Kevin has also created an open source software repository on GitHub where we share all the widgets and utilities that we've made for OBS Studio. So that's kind of fun. We're having fun with the show graphics and animated stingers. We basically are getting into it to get in touch with our journalistic roots, have a good time. We both work remotely, so this gives us friend time that most people who work in an office get on a regular basis. Everyone has their work friends. So this creates a social space for us, but we're also, we're a really good team where we push each other. So I feel like we're always challenging each other to do new cool things with the software, or new cool things with the graphics, or new approach to integrating a special guest on the episode, things like that. So we're always evolving the process. We're always evolving the show. So that's one of the great things about it. Another one of the great things about it is we're learning a lot about building audiences on YouTube, on Twitter, Instagram. So we're managing all 3 of these accounts. We're going to add a Facebook page here very soon. So we're trying to figure out how all this ties together and how to drive people to watch the videos and subscribe. So there's a lot of professional implication here as well, because Kevin's much more of a hardcore developer, but I get involved with not only the development but the strategy as well. So being able to speak intelligently and share experiences that I've had firsthand with managing a property like this and trying to build the audiences, and being able to look at the analytics and determine, what needs to be tweaked, where things need to be added, taken away, all that good stuff. That part has just been phenomenally good and a great experience. So, I guess looking back at 11 episodes of the podcast and 8 episodes of the Bob and Kevin Show, the biggest thing is I'm learning about all these different attributes, all these different things, but I'm also learning a ton about myself. So I guess that's really why I sat down to record this episode today, to share that I've been learning a lot about not only the people that I love and the people that I've had on the show, my friends, but learning a lot about myself. It's been a really cool inner journey so far. So I'm very excited to keep that going. And as long as I can keep that in perspective, I think it's going to be a really good hobby and a really good way for me to, my creative outlet. I'm not really a drawer. I'm not really a painter. I can't sing. My guitar playing is, bleh, it's, very basic stuff. But this is something where I can kind of paint on a different kind of canvas and express myself in ways and really just learn a lot. So hopefully being on this voyage with me is something that you find exciting. But even if you don't, I'm kind of just in it, to have that excitement for me. So I'd love for you to come along on the ride and let me know what you think. And if you have ideas for either of the shows, feel free to reach out to me. But I think at 44-ish minutes, that's about all I got. So thanks for hanging in with me for these 11 episodes, and hopefully you'll hang in for another, let's call it, I don't know, another 1,000, 1,500. But thanks, and hit that subscribe and hit some likes and send me some tweets and let me know what you think. Have a great week, and we will see you next week. Bye.